Hello, and welcome back to the Arcarius Podcast, where I, your host, Nevin, and my co-host over here making his appearance for the first time.
My name's Camilo, and I'll be your co-host today.
There we go. We got a new face on here. It's only episode number 3, the first of the first starting trilogy, so should be interesting. So, Camilo, how about, since this is your first time, tell us a little bit about yourself. A little bit about how you got into the hobby, how I got you into the hobby would probably be the better way to do it.
Fair enough. I mean, I guess I saw the Games Workshop store at our local mall, and I was always intrigued by it. And then, like, 6 years later, I met this guy in school, and he's like, hey, you want to play Warhammer? And I was like, you know what? Why not?
There we go.
And that's how I got into it.
It's called indoctrination tactics here. So, yes, I got Camilo into it, and I almost basically chose his first army for him with, of course, what he would like. He had the color I got. Basically, I let him paint one of my Grey Knights. He painted in the exact color of the Thousand Suns, and I knew he'd be interested. They got the Egyptian theme going. I think it would be quite cool. So, and I okayed it with him. I helped him. We started, and now we have it in a couple models already. We still got to build the Stereo called Terminators that have been sitting on my shelf for a couple months, but we'll get there eventually, right?
Eventually.
All right, so today's video is going to be about how to build your first army. And we have him here. So we're going to be using the Thousand Suns as an example. So we're going to be building, I have put together a couple lists already for 500 points, 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and then I have two 2,000 point armies. One with Magnus the Red and one without. Just to give a little bit of difference in there. And I think before we start, I do have to give a disclaimer. I don't play Thousand Suns. I've read over the rules a couple times. I've read over data sheets. I've watched people who know how to play them, and I've generally followed a couple rules. I didn't stick strictly to them because I know, I didn't stick strictly to it. Like, cultists are better than Zangors in almost every way, but I still played with Zangors in this just to have a little bit of fun. So we did that, and yeah. I think first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through a couple units, not their data sheet specifically, but just a couple units, give a description of each, and go from there. So, to get into it, the first thing we're going to be talking about is one of your more core units. It is the Rubric Marines. They are your intercessor equivalents. They are your baseline infantry, and they're all around good. They're your jack of all trades kind of unit. They're good at most things, not great at anything. They can deal some damage, which is pretty good. They can take some damage, pretty good. And they generate something called Cabal points, which is the main army ability for Thousand Suns. You generate Cabal points, and those get put towards rituals and fun things. Basically, Magic in 10th edition. So it's a lot of fun. And they generate it. So they're a great thing to have in the army. And that's what armies are generally based around. Now, we'll talk about when we get to the 2,000 points, but I didn't go hard on the Cabal points. I got to a certain point, and I'm like, let's go for fun at this point. So, Rubric Marines, good. You can take them in 5 and 10-man squads. They're good at 10-man. They're good at 5-man. They're all around pretty good. They're just your baseline infantry. You can get some special weapons on them, but generally you have the sorcerer and then 4 infernal bolters or something along that line. And maybe one of their infernal Gatling cannons or what have you, or a flamer. So, Camilo.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the rubrics?
They seem pretty cool. I mean, they're just basic, so I feel like they might get a little bit annoying to paint because there's so many of them, but I feel like they do seem like a pretty useful unit because they're basic, and as it says here, like, they're not the best at anything, but they're not bad at anything either, which means that they're pretty versatile, and it seems like you can just kind of mow through things with them, right?
Right. Okay. Perfect. Now, if you're watching, Camilo has a computer in front of him. I have a slideshow with a little bit of information about every unit we go through and a picture just so he can give his thoughts on them.
I got a cheat sheet.
Yes, we got a cheat sheet for him. And it's not going to be like this last time where we had Tristan drop his cheat sheet, because if he drops the computer, this episode's not coming out. On to our next one. Now, this is one of our more exciting ones, and is the main reason I wanted him to get into it so I can borrow his army once or twice. And we have the Scarab called Terminators, which they're your Terminators. Every Space Marine-esque faction has a Terminator equivalent. But these guys are a little bit more special than most other Terminators. These ones are very expensive at 200 points for 5 of them, or 400 points for 10 of them, almost a quarter of your army. But they are pretty good at shooting. They're very tanky, and they have some weapon options that allow them to be a bit more versatile. They also generate Cabal points, and they are going to be one of the main things you have in your army from what I've looked at and what I've gone through and how I would like to play. Probably, and Camila will eventually learn to play with them. They will be your different at higher points. It's going to be your choice between a 10 block of them or Magnus the Red. They're about the same points, but Terminators, in my opinion, are going to be a little bit more cool. They're going to be just kind of that thing that's in the middle of the board that your opponent cannot deal with unless they have the specific weaponry to shoot them, and even then, that's not really going to happen. And even if they do, they're going to be lacking on other points of your army. So the Scarab Cult Terminators, really good, fun elite units. Just great.
Yeah, I think they just look cooler than tanks, and I mean, because there's 5 of them, in theory, they could be more versatile than tank because it would take more rolls to determine whether one of these gets hit, right? Because there's 5 of them. There's
true.
5 to hit.
It's not going to be like a one model where you can just take a tank and just absolutely nuke it with the damage. If you shot a tank into this unit, you'd have to shoot 5 different shots, and that doesn't happen.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. In theory, you could disperse your... this is more dispersed than a tank. So while a tank could do more damage straight away, it could be more useful to have these.
And plus, they're stupidly tanky. So your opponent, if you have a 10 block of these and a Terminator Sorcerer Lord, and you're just buffing these guys to high heaven, they're just not gonna. They're gonna avoid them at some point, and that's where you get your damage in. They have the General Storm Bolters. They have and then they have I believe, flamethrower equivalent, just a chaff clear, and then they have an anti-tank weapon, and they also have a missile rack. So they're versatile, and they can put some hurt on some tougher enemies. So that's 2 great points for them. On to the next one, we have Sorcerers and Exalted Sorcerers. These are your hero-esque unit, or your hero-like units. And Sorcerers are 1 tier. Exalted Sorcerers are just a bit tier above them, being more expensive, but they get a little bit more for it. They're going to generate majority of your Cabal points, because I believe Exalteds generate 3 and Sorcerers generate somewhere below that. But they're great for leading troops. They're great for sitting in the back line. They're just all around great to have, and it is one of the best kits in the game to be buying, because you buy, I believe, a $60, $70 kit in Canada here, and it is 5 points per dollar, which is the best points you will ever find in any GW kit. And as someone who has bought bits offline from those kits, they're very good for bits. Like, you get bird heads, you get all that other fun stuff. And this will come up very important when we talk about Magnus.
Isn't this the only... Don't I only have one of these?
No, you have the Infernal Master. He's a different one.
Oh, okay.
I was going to get you that kit, but then I'm like, the Scarab Cult Terminators would be better anyways. Okay. But no, you get 3 models in one, and they're all hero units, and they're like 100 points each or something like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
So they're pretty great to have. Next is a very quick one. Cultists. All Chaos factions have them. They're cheap objective holders and meat shields and all that fun stuff. They're basically, 55 points for 10 of them, go die, or stay on the back point and let me forget about you for the next hour. They're very cheap. They're very... I'd say the only downside to them is they're bad in fighting, and you'd have to, if you want a 20 stack, you're spending a good amount of money for them. But other than that, they're enjoyable, good sculpts. There's not much to say about cultists. Zongors. And I didn't spell it right on the cheat sheet, so we're going to ignore that fact. There is the Zongor Shaman, which is the hero. The normal Zongors, which are the cultists, almost cultists, but they cost a little bit more in points-wise. And then you have the Zongor Enlightened, which are 3 to 6 man groups on discs. So let's start with the Shaman. Shaman, by himself, not a very good unit. If you have Zongor, though, they can be pretty good, especially with one of the enhancements that give a 5+ feel no pain, I believe it is. If you have a 20 stack of them, you put a Zongor Shaman inside that 20 stack of Zangors, that's not moving off the board for a good while. Like, they will soak some damage, and they could be pretty useful. Zongor Enlightened, you can also throw the Shaman in there. The Enlightened are great as secondary objectives. So they'll zoom around the board, go harass your enemy's back line, or do that kind of stuff. They have a good ranged option. They have a not as good melee option, but they're kind of cheap. I think it's 75 points for the 3 ones on disc, so they're very cheap, and they're very annoying for the opponent to deal with, and they're just very fun to bring along. You can, and Camila, if you decide you could just never touch Zongors in your entire career, and people would applaud that.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of just seem like a pain to paint, and I mean, they don't seem that. I mean, you know,
they aren't that bad to paint. I've painted 1 or 2, but
yeah, but I mean, they don't seem like they're that useful to be painting like for hours, anyways. Because I take forever to paint stuff.
Right. So I'd recommend at least 1 Enlightened unit, because it's like you throw that with Armin and you just do secondary objectives. You kind of need to do them. But
Okay.
Then again, you could also do the Screamers from Zinch and get them to do it. But from there, we move on to
Mutalith Vortex Beast.
There we go. He is the big tank-like creature of the roster, and he's a big buff machine, so everything around him will get a buff. I don't remember exactly what they are, but he's a great buff. He's a very great tank, and he's just a really, really cool model to just have on there. And he's, for a big monster like that, he's pretty maneuverable. Like, he's not slow. He's just pretty good to have on the board.
It's kind of, I'm starting to realize that, like, apart from the actual, like, Rubric Marines, there is nothing that looks very Egyptian based out of, like, the Thousand Suns.
Okay, fair enough. I you know what? I agree with that.
I do like this one, though. This one,
The Mutalith
cool.
Vortex.
Yeah.
The Thousand Suns are due for some unit updates. Like, some units got the Rubric Marines kind of need their sculpts not updated, but they need the sprues updated so you can buy them in 5s.
Mm-hmm.
And they need a couple different things on them. Like, they need a Dreadnought that's official, and they need a couple things updated on them, but generally they're not too bad.
Okay. Yeah, I just find it weird that this guy, like, or I would probably just choose to not paint this purple and blue, but another color.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You can paint it however you want. You have to have that on it because it looks so cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the first of our 2 named characters, which is Armin. He is our guy on disc or guy on foot. He's just a basic sorcerer rubric almost. He's just better than most of the others. He's not bad. He's not very good in melee. None of the Thousand Suns really are good in melee, but he can do something. His main thing comes in he spells, Cabal Boyne, sorceries, that kind of thing. He's got some uniqueness there. He's just fun to have, and if you want something more than just an Exalted Sorcerer, he's great to have on the table. And if you're not going to run Magnus, I would almost recommend you almost every time run Armin if you're not going to run Magnus. He's great. Even if you don't like put him in a group, you just put him on a disc and run him around the board to do secondaries and just snipe out targets. Pretty good.
Yeah, he seems cool. I mean, he seems like a useful unit. Does he, like, combine with anybody else like sorcerers do?
Yes. So he will rubrics. On foot he can go with rubrics. I'm not sure on disc what he can go with.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he could also go with rubrics, but at that point, just take him off disc.
Okay,
the disc is better to keep him alone then.
Yeah,
because he's very maneuverable, he's very fast, and he can get behind cover, so you don't have to worry about getting shot at too much.
Okay, sweet.
Next is Magnus the Red, and this is the fun part of the episode because we get to hear a very hot take. Magnus, a beautiful model in my opinion, is one of your main models in this army. We're gonna get to the fun part in a sec here. I'm ready. My smile's humongous. Magnus, mainstay unit, great unit. He's a beat stick. He runs up the board. He's very fast at 12-inch movement. You can extend that with one of the sorcerer, like one of the spells, and just zoom across the board. And you just get him into combat, and he will beat 90% of the things in the game and still have a good amount of health left over. He is a bit pricey at 440 points, so he is very expensive. Now, the points can change per data slate, but generally he's going to be expensive. And if you take him in your army, you don't really want to take him at lower point games because it's either going to be a blowout because your opponent can't deal with him, or he's going to die and you're not going to have anything else in your army. At higher points, a little bit better. He's not, if he dies, it's not that bad. And he'll get in the enemy's face and just do stuff. Now, let's hear it. Let's hear the hot take.
I don't really like him. He looks weird. He doesn't look like he fits with any of the Thousand Suns. I mean, he's red, for crying out loud. I mean, they're blue and gold. I don't know what was going through their mind when they made him red, especially when we're going for like what seems to be based off of an Egyptian theme. I don't know why you wouldn't make him look more like an Egyptian god where they were all like painted in black like a dog or something, right? Like, I feel like that would have been just perfect because, I mean, like, in theory, the Primarchs they don't have to look like anything specific, right? They could have mutated into anything. I mean, this guy grew wings. He could have also grown a snout.
So he's red. It went better with the Horus Heresy, the stuff before 40k, so 30k.
Yeah.
Because in 30k, the Thousand Suns were red.
Yeah.
So he went a little bit better with his faction, but I see what you mean. He's not the most Egyptian-y. He's not kind of, he still has some Egyptian elements to him, like the Kopesh spear looking thing. Yeah. And some symbols, but I understand what you're saying. The armor's weird. I'm not going to mention those two words because, yeah, no, that's how you...
Yeah, I don't know. He looks like Mexican folklore with Egyptian armor on him.
You're not wrong. You know what? I'll give it that to you.
He looks straight out of like one of the animals from Coco, the Disney movie.
That would make sense. that I could get behind. All right, now on to the next thing. The next thing we have is Tzeentch Demons. So it's generally competitively not advised to ever ally Tzeentch Demons in, but you know what? We're not here for competitive all the time.
You were talking about these guys before. They just seem confusing with like the way that they quite literally...
That's Pink Horrors, though. That's only one unit you have to worry about.
I guess, yeah.
So generally you don't ally any of the Tzeentch Demons in because they're small units. They don't benefit from your rules. You don't benefit from their rules as much. And so you just generally don't ally them in. But you know what? In a fluffy list where you can just have fun, like Camila's most likely you do. I don't believe you're going to any tournaments.
Probably not.
So Tzeentch Demons are just fun. And then the nice thing is with Tzeentch Demons, if you buy a couple, you can always expand that into a Demon's army or even expand that into an AOS army. So you can play both the fantasy and the sci-fi one, which you could play with me and Nolan, which is great. From there's going to be a couple that we don't mention, like the Rhino, Land Raider, those kind of things. Land Raider's your big, beefy tank that also can put out a bunch of damage. Your Rhino's your very cheap troop transport. There's not much else to talk about with them. So first, we're going to get on to our first of the, 5 lists? Yes, first of the 5 lists, which is the 500-point list. Right now, we have for this list, we're at 490 points and 5 Cabal points a turn. Not bad. Could be better. You're not going to cast your higher end spells, but you know what? That's not bad. And I based these early lists, off of what we've collected for Camila so far, which is an Infernal Master and a Scarab called Terminator Squad. So most of these cheaper lists have those in them at the very least. So the 500-point list here has one Infernal Master as your Warlord. You have just a normal Thousand Sun Sorcerer as your just kind of secondary Lord. And then you have a group of 5 Rubric Marines and a group of 5 Terminators. Now, this is not the best list for a 500-point, but you know what? This game's not balanced for 500 points anyway, so it's not too bad. It's just a nice, fluffy list that'll get you into the core of the army. Pretty good. Sadly, one of your leaders is not going to be leading anything, but nah. Next, we move on to the 1,000-point list, where we have a little bit more to it. So we have Armin on disc, just to do his fun thing of move around, all that fun stuff. Then we have an exalted sorcerer. So we've taken the sorcerer, made him exalted. He now generates an extra cabal point. The sorcerers generate 1. The exalted sorcerers generate 2. We also have the Infernal Master from the last one. With this time, we have a group of 10 Rubric Marines and then a group of 5 Rubric Marines. And just to throw things in, they're your core of your army, and it'll allow both your Exalted Sorcerer and your Infernal Master to lead a unit and not get shot out, whereas Armin can just zoom around on his desk. We then have the same Scarab Occult Terminator 5 squad. We have 10,000 Suns Cultists because they're 55 points, cheap, and they can sit on your home objective. And then we have the Rhino to transport probably the 10-man Rubric squad and then one of the characters.
So can you carry around like troops within your Rhino?
Yes. So there's certain units in the game, like the Rhino, that have the transport special rule. Mm-hmm. And they can, it depends on the model. So the Rhino can, I believe, carry around 12 models. Okay. Yeah. 12 models that does not include Terminators. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can carry 12. Generally, it's 10 rubrics and then for like a character. Yeah. And you just put them in the Rhino. It keeps them safe. It can the nice thing is it's cheap, and if you're having a real problem with tanks, you put on the rocket launcher onto it, and it can do a little bit extra damage.
Very sweet.
And it's just fun to have around. From there, we move to the 1,500 point line. Oh, on the 1,000 point, it was 10 Cabal points a turn. It did not go up very much for the 15. At 1,500 points, we have 11 Cabal points per turn. Not the best. Again, I don't play them. I didn't maximize it to Cabal points because I'm not trying to go for competitive viability, just for fun viability. And we're going to have fun with this, not be, oh, this unit's the best, so we're going to go with that. No. If you play that way, you're going to get screwed over by a Data Slate and just not have fun for the next couple months. So we're going with a generalistic army that can be stronger at some points and weaker at other points, but still have that 50% win rate in mind. With this one, we're going to keep Armin on disc. He's going to stay there. We're going to have the 1 Exalted Sorcerer, 1 Infernal Master, 1 Zongor Shaman. And these Exalted Sorcerers and Masters both have their enhancements on them. So just to fill out points, you can change stuff around, add more cultists, and do whatever. But from there, we have a Zongor Shaman, 1, not on disc. And then we have a group of 10 rubrics, a group of 5 rubrics. So 15 in total, still from last one. But now we have 20 Zangors, which really good. The way I built it, they're 5+ invuln and save, and I believe it's either 5+ invuln and save or 5+ feel no pain. I can't remember. But they are a tanky 20 man with the Zangor Shaman in it. And it's a nice thing. You shove up the midboard. It annoys the heck out of your opponent because they want to deal with it, but it's so much. You have to put so much firepower into them and just not deal with anything else. What?
I feel like the 20 Zongers just feel like spam almost.
It kind of is. It kind of is. But it's just like, oh, you want to move through this narrow passage? You got to kill us first. And
you can just make a wall of flesh and just block them out from going through half of the board.
You can't make a strict wall because if you break that, half of them die.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they have to be with 1 inch, and if they get split up, it's a weird mess, and I don't remember the rules in 10th, but it's a weird mess.
Still, I feel like they could just be such a mess. If like you said, if you put them in a tight spot, then you literally just have to progress through it in multiple rounds. And
I believe like it'll take 2, maybe 3 rounds to fully take them out, and so you're just clogging up the paths. You're clogging the arteries. We move on, and this time, instead of a 5 Scarab Occult Terminator, we have a 400-point 10-man squad. So as the Zangors are sitting there getting shot by the enemy, the Scarab Occults are going to be dealing damage back. And by the end of the game, if you get through the Zangors, you're not going to kill the Terminators, and vice versa. You can't kill them both in one game. Yes.
How come you don't get more Cabal points despite doubling the Occult Terminators?
Because the Occult Terminators, so think of it as squads of 10 are technically squads of 9 and then a leader. Okay. Because you're not adding a leader. So the leader in the Scarab Occult Terminators is a sorcerer, as we see on the box here. Mm-hmm. And same with the rubrics. You don't add another leader unit to it. So if you really want to expand the Cabal points, you take that 10-man squad and split it into 2 5-mans.
Okay.
So you can definitely change it around, and it's not like if you buy 2 5-man boxes, you don't always have to run them as a 10-man.
Yeah.
But that's if you really want more Cabal points or you just want a big unit.
Yeah, because would that have any downsides to have less of them running in one single unit? There's no extra point cost to it, is there?
No, there's no extra point cost.
It's more divided, which is a bit harder to manage,
It's
right?
more divided, and then, yeah, certain rules affect... certain abilities from the other side can affect smaller units more than bigger units.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's really is not a huge downside to running 2 5-mans, but also if you have a character and you put them in that 10-man, it's better to have them in 10-man than one of the 5-mans because it's just more durability before the character dies.
Okay.
And it buffs 10 instead of buffs one of the 5. You can decide when we get to playing with them, so it's not too bad. From there, we have a Thousand Suns Cultist unit of 10. Pretty standard like last time. Then we have Zangor and Light to go with Armin. They have the bows just to be harassing, shooting. And then we have the Rhino again. All right. So we move on to the 2,000 point list here. The first of two. This one has no Magnus the Red, and there's just Armin in it still. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take Armin off the Disc of Zinch and just move him normally. Now, for you, I will help you with magnetizing that so you can take them on and off and just don't have to buy 2 Armins. Mm-hmm. But we take Armin, then we take the Exalted Sorcerer and put him on a Disc of Zinch to do what Armin was doing. And then we have Infernal Master and 1,000 Sun Sorcerer and Terminator Armor. Fun to have, just kind of buffs the Scarab Occult Terminator unit and just great to have around. Then we're going to have Zangor Shaman and then 20 Rubric Marines, 2 10-mans, one with Armin in it and one with the Infernal Master in it. From there, we have split the 20 Zangor group into 2 10s, just more objective stuff to do around the map with objectives. You don't have to put a 20-man down the range. Then we have the 10-man of Scarab Occult Terminators. The Terminator Lord will go into this, will buff it to high heaven, and they'll be the best thing in your army at that point. Then you have a 10-man of Cultists. Then you have 2 3-man Enlightened to harass, do secondaries, and just be around the map. And then you have 1 Mutaleth Vortex Beast and 2 Rhinos, 1 for each of the squads. Mutaleth Vortex Beast, basically with this one, you're going to have your 2 10-man Rubrics, both in Rhinos. You're going to have your Scarab Occult Terminators, however you want to do them, and then you're going to have your Mutaleth Vortex Beast. You're going to send the Vortex Beast in one of the Rubrics, you're going to spend those up the board. The Terminators are going to go up their way into the main fighting and just wreak havoc on the enemy. From there, we move on to the other 2,000 point list, which includes Magnus the Red. So, to start off our list, our Warlord is Magnus the Red, the big guy. We have traded Armin out, so he's no longer in the list, but that's okay. We have Magnus now. Then we have Exalted Sorcerer on Disc of Zinch to do what Magnus was doing. Then we have Infernal Master and another 1,000 Suns Sorcerer, Lord, and Terminator Armor. We do have a small 5-man group of Terminators because they are still a mainstay of the army and they are still a good idea to take, just not a full 10-man. From there, we have a Zangor Shaman, 2 10-man Rubrics, only 1 10-man of Zangors, 1 5-man of Scarab Occult Terminators, 1,000 Suns 10-man Cultists. Then we have a full 6 group of Zangor Enlightened. You can move that, you can change that into 2 3-mans, but they're just doing the same thing as they were in the other list. Move around, secondaries, that kind of thing. Then we have 1 Mutaleth Vortex, and then 2,000 Suns Rhinos. Same thing as the other list, except instead of the 10-man of Scarab Occult to wreak havoc, you have Magnus to do the same thing. And he will just move up the board and chew through everything.
Why does the Exalted Sorcerer Disc of Zinch cost less points and have...
Right, sorry.
Yeah, it costs 20 points less.
Sorry. Because the one on the last one had enhancements. I'm not mentioning enhancements, but there are things you can add. It depends on which attachment you take, but you can add enhancements that give them a special ability or special weapon, or usually it is when this unit leads a unit of models. Like, so if you put it on a Terminator Lord, you put that Terminator Lord in a Terminator stack, and you put an enhancement on him, sometimes it'll give it so that entire unit gets a buff, an extra buff. or that unit or the Terminator Lord gets a special staff that he waves around and does extra damage, or he buffs this or he does that. The enhancements cost anywhere from 20 to 35 points in this army. They're usually actually pretty good, but I haven't really mentioned them because you can do that ad nauseum and do that how you wish.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, this is the Magnus one, and yeah, that's all I have for it. So, what are your thoughts here?
It's pretty interesting. The only thing I guess I would have added to the presentation or cheat sheet is how much each of these armies adds up to.
What do you mean?
Like in actual costs.
Oh God, we don't talk about that. I have my sources. I have my sources to get you.
I'll talk about that. That's fair.
If you really don't like building, I have you.
Okay, sweet. Because I was gonna say there's this, not the one with Magnus the Red, but the one with Armin had 84 models on the board.
Okay. Don't worry. So
I'm just saying, painting all of that is gonna take a long time.
True, and that's why you do it. Like you don't. So the way we're gonna be playing in this group is we're not gonna be. Not everything has to be painted. We can still have gray tide. We can have the tide with the primer on it. I'm not worried about it. You paint them. This is a hobby. You enjoy your painting. Okay, we will talk about a lot of competitive here, and maybe not as much in this video, but the competitive will be a definitely thing. We're not going to worry about painting rules in competitive right now. Like when we play, we can play with Great Tide. I'm not worried about it. What are your thoughts on the Thousand Suns right now?
Yeah, it's looking pretty good. They actually have like a pretty interesting layout for like what I can pick from, right? So
right,
yeah, it looks like a lot of fun.
And you can always change it. Like if you really don't like the Zangors, add another 5 mana rubrics, or take another 5 mana out and add more Zangors if you like Zangors. The one bad thing is it's not like the CSM, or it's not like Space Marines where you have every little niche has a spot. You have multiple units filling multiple different niches. So you got to play around, and you do have a very confined list, or a confined list of different models you can use. But they will expand upon it in the future because they haven't gotten a huge update in a while. The Death Guard got an update before them, which is surprising because they're a couple of years newer. But they will get their comeuppance. Sorry, that's probably not the right word. The Thousand Suns will get their love eventually from GW. It's just a matter of time. It's not too far off. Hopefully. Perfect. Any last remarks, my friend?
No, I don't think so. That was pretty straightforward now that we have a cheat sheet and everything.
Perfect. And of course, we can change lists as you like it. And I will help you through this journey of collecting your army, especially for getting shit for cheap.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to throw you to the wolves. I've done that before.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you for joining us on the Arcarius Podcast. Oh, I guess Tristan's not here, so. Thank you for joining. Oh, God, I'm not going to do it. Thank you for joining us on the Arcarius Podcast. I can't do it as well as he can.
Maybe I can do it.
You got to do it with an Aussie.
Aussie accent?
Aussie
I thought
accent.
it was British, the way you did it.
I can't do it. I got a really bad Aussie.
Hold on. I'll think about Sheila and then the shrimp on the barbie. And then we can say, thank you for joining us on the Arcarius Podcast today. Hope you have a great day, mates.
Oh my God, this is gold. I'm if at his wedding this is going on.
Oh, hell no.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.